Jimmy Butler's beef with other players sometimes comes from, come on, I worked my way from nowhere to a star.
But that's not that's not the chemistry issue I was alluding to.
What chemistry issue?
No, I was just talking about on that. I'm
going to get to that in a second.
I just make it clear that wasn't my position.
But to be clear for both of you, don't worry about the chemistry issues that you had in Chicago and you had in Minnesota.
No.
You're saying that's not going to be a problem.
That's not going to be a problem here. Number one, because Chris Paul's on this team. That's the emotional leader of the team. And you're not going to be like, I've outworked Chris Paul, right? Like Chris Paul is shorter and slower than you. Jimmy Butler doesn't jump as high. And in fact, Chris Paul is even better than you. So as hard as you work, no one's outworking Chris Paul. Okay, I think all that's going to be okay. Let's look at the actual chemistry of the way the team is constructed. Stephen A., they lost their perimeter defense. They lost their wing defense with Luke Mabute and Trevor Ariza, of course. And they replaced it with Carmelo Anthony. I thought that made them worse. But now you got Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's a premier defender. And in fact, he needs the ball. Not really. Jimmy Butler made his bones as a defensive player who played without the ball. But when he does have the ball, he can get to the rim. Not a very good shooter. In a good year, he shoots well enough.
He's shooting 42% for three-point range right now.
Right. In a good year, he shoots well enough, but that comes and goes with him. But he can get to the rim. Now you got three guys who can attack the rim. And when you look at this team defensively, what a pivotal player he'd be. Chris Paul can defend. Jimmy Butler can defend. P.J. Tucker can defend. Clint Capella can defend. And Harden's actually slightly underrated defensively. You go from a team where you're like, where's the defense? Actually to a tough defensive team. This is Daryl Morey saying, I have not given up. The window did not close last year. I'm going to identify an undervalued commodity on the marketplace, just as I did with James Harden. And I'm going to go for this thing. Good for Daryl Morey. I love it.
Let me tell you something. I don't love it, and I've already stated why, but I'll take it a step further. If you're going to go all in with 4 picks, why not offer 4 picks in Capella for Anthony Davis? Why not do something like that? If you're going to offer 4 first-round picks into the future, spanning 8 years, because you can't offer it back-to-back years, okay? So it has to spread out according to league rules, right? If you're going to do that, then you can't just think about now. You got to think about 3 years from now, 4 years from now as well. You talk about solidifying your future. James Harden is locked in. Chris Paul just signed a lengthy extension. He's locked in. Whether it's Clint Capella or an Eric Gordon. If I'm talking about if you going all in and you want to use this analogy that you know what, Jimmy Butler toughens you. Jimmy Butler elevates your level of defensive prowess, not to mention the fact that he could give you something offensively. Then I'm like, if you're going to go all in like that, excuse me, pick up the phone and call the Pelicans and offer them Anthony Davis, because we know that he's going to want out. He's going to announce to the world that he wants out of New Orleans. If not during this season, certainly by the end of this season, going into the following season. And, next offseason is what I'm talking about here. I like Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler can ball. Jimmy Butler deserves to get paid at least $140 million to $170 million in today's market. I know he can play, but looking at how Houston plays, I'm saying, is that going to be enough to offset or overcome the Golden State Warriors? I don't believe that's going to be the case.
Hold on. I want to underline something you just said, because these 4 picks cannot be in back-to-back years.
That's correct.
Because at the top of your head, you think, well, what are these picks worth? They're a bunch of low 20s picks.
That's right.
But they're stretched out over 7 years.
That's right.
But see, now I think I caught you in an inconsistency, because is that really all in then? It sounds like a ton, right? 4 first-round picks. But now you're saying it's not all in anyway.
No.
So how valuable are those picks spread out over 7 years?
Well, let me tell you that in the sport of basketball, they deem it valuable. That's like you coming to me and saying to me, how valuable is a second-round pick? But you talk to an NFL team, they're raising holy hell if they got to give up a second-round pick. Don't even get me started with the first. The Khalil Macks, that's an aberration. Those things don't happen every day. I'm telling you, in the sport of basketball, particularly when things are spread out, those picks are valuable to those executives. So based on it being of value to them, I'm saying if you're making this move for Jimmy Butler, you need to be able to say to me, I'm giving up 4 first-round picks because I believe this move will bring us the chip.
I think it might.
I'm saying, well, you say it might. I say it might not. But I'm saying to you, if I'm giving up 4 first-round picks, it would be for somebody the caliber of
I don't mind the
Anthony
Davis point at all. That's interesting. I don't think it's because Daryl Morey hasn't done his due diligence. I think he thinks this is the best guy available that he can actually go out and get. It's not inconsistent, by the way, the 4 picks, because it's how all in is it? Well, in fact, you would think the picks in the near future wouldn't be very valuable. If they all occurred in the next year or two, it's like, wow, you have a great team. Those are going to be very low picks. But over 7 years, Chris Paul's 34 years old. Here's what Daryl Morey's really saying by that. He's betting on himself. Morey's betting on himself, not only that he'd still have the job, but that he will be a good enough GM that those picks will never be very valuable. that a Houston Rockets pick, as long as Daryl Morey is the GM, is not going to be toward the front half of the first round. It's going to be toward the back half, even as Chris Paul gets older. I love it.
Or if this window closes and this experiment fails, you unload Chris Paul, you unload James Harden, you recoup those picks down the road with a different reboot.
Jimmy Butler.
Well, let's keep in mind, first of all, you got somebody like a James Harden. He's getting paid 30 this year, 38 next year, 40 in the year 2020, 21. So that's easier said than done. Chris Paul, we know that he's got numbers at 35, 38, 41, $44 million in the last year of his deal at 2021-22 season. So, again, we could talk about them moving those individuals, but then that remains to be seen. In the end, what it really, really comes down to, Daryl Morey, and this is what I love about, this is the one thing I will say I love about Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey is the boss. Daryl Morey is the GM of the Houston Rockets. He's the guy that makes the moves. We get it. He always consults James Harden. He always reaches out to him. His whole thing is, this is my franchise player. What is it that we need? They have those discussions. They come to a conclusion. Boom, they go ahead and do it. He's not leaving James Harden hanging. He's making sure James Harden and Chris Paul know, I'm going to do all I can to make us a championship team, and he's not leaving them behind, and I respect that. I just don't think
because he's a great
is
GM.
enough to overcome Golden State this year.
Because he's a great GM. I want to point out along those lines, Daryl Morey took a team that wasn't the worst in the league, so you're going to get the #1 overall pick, and so now you have a franchise player. He created this from whole cloth. Nothing was there, and he identified a superstar who was not apparent was a superstar in James Harden. He traded what he needed to trade to get him. He acquired Chris Paul. He communicates with his players, and now he's saying, I'm going to put a third guy there, and it's going to be Jimmy Butler. I love it.